About 10 months had crawled by since Brandon, his girlfriend Rachel, and their wild crew of YouTubers, Ash Curry, Luigi Kid, Markiplier, and Corix Genshin, had stared down the unimaginable and triumphed. They'd faced off against that deranged, demonic version of SpongeBob, battling through a nightmarish gauntlet of haunted video games and twisted, cursed cartoons, until they finally sent the monster packing, straight to the deepest, hottest pit anyone could imagine. After that, the world exhaled for the first time in years. People smiled again. Kids played games without fear of ghosts in the code. For a while, it felt like the darkness that had stalked them was finally gone for good. With the chaos behind them and normalcy returning, Brandon and Rachel realized how desperately they needed to recharge. They both agreed it was time for a real break, something untainted by horror and madness. So, they booked a trip to Disney World. May there had ever been. Honestly, Rachel's excitement caught Brandon off guard. She'd always been the calm one, but now she was practically buzzing with anticipation, her eyes lighting up at the mere mention of roller coasters and castles. She laughed about hunting for hidden Mickeys and eating way too much cotton candy. For both of them, this trip was supposed to be a symbol, a return to innocence, a place where nightmares couldn't follow. Determined to make the most of it, they decided to tackle the biggest roller coasters first. As they strapped in, Rachel was practically bouncing in her seat, her hands gripping the safety bar with white-knuckled excitement. The coaster launched, whipping around corners at breakneck speed. Rachel's laughter rang out, wild and free, until a sharp turn sent her stomach lurching. Before she knew it, she was hurling over the side, showering an unsuspecting crowd below with her breakfast. When the ride screeched to a halt, she staggered off, dizzy and giggling, looking like she just downed a six-pack in 5 minutes. Brandon couldn't help but laugh along. For the first time in months, they both felt alive. But just as they were catching their breath, their happiness was shattered. Out of the swirling crowd, a man in a Mickey Mouse costume appeared, looming at the edge of their vision. He didn't speak. He didn't even wave. He just lifted a gloved hand and gestured, slow and deliberate. The sight chilled Brandon to the bone. In that silent, looming gesture, Brandon felt the old fear return, a cold, creeping dread he'd hoped he'd left behind with SpongeBob's ashes. It was as if the universe was reminding him, monsters don't just live in video games and cartoons. Rachel's grip tightened on his arm, her voice trembling.
Brandon, don't. This feels wrong. What if it's another trap?
Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape route. Brandon tried to brush it off with a joke, but he saw through his own bravado.
It's just a guy in a costume. What's he gonna do, challenge us to a dance-off?
But deep down, his instincts screamed at him that this was no ordinary Disney magic. Rachel, desperate to keep him from going, tried everything, joking, teasing, even slipping her hand into his, hoping he'd listen to her gut for once. But that old curiosity, that stubborn need to face the unknown, flared up in Brandon. He couldn't help himself. Something about this encounter felt heavier, darker, like it was meant for them specifically. Mickey led them through the park, past smiling families and swirling music, into a building that seemed perfectly ordinary from the outside. But inside, the air grew colder. They followed the mascot deeper and deeper underground, down winding stairwells and through narrow halls where the cheerful Disney melodies faded into a suffocating silence. The further they went, the more Brandon felt like they were descending into another world, a place where laughter had no meaning. Finally, they entered a room so dark that Brandon could barely see his hand in front of his face. As his eyes adjusted, the horrors revealed themselves. Cages lined the walls, each one holding a child. Their faces were gaunt, eyes wide with terror, hands gripping the bars so tightly their knuckles bled. The air was thick with the stench of fear and something far worse. Then, footsteps echoed across the concrete floor, and a hulking figure entered, the man the kids called the Butcher. He was monstrous in size, his face hidden behind a grotesque mask. Without a word, he strode to one of the cages, unlocked it, and dragged out a small, trembling boy. Before Brandon or Rachel could even speak, the Butcher raised a massive cleaver and, with a sickening thud, severed the child's head from his shoulders. blood splattered the floor. The other children screamed, their voices high and piercing. Rachel collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably.
He was just a kid. He was just a kid, you monster.
Her cries echoed around the chamber, raw and broken. As if things couldn't get worse, the Mickey figure, still silent, began to remove his own head. But this wasn't a simple costume reveal. The sound was sickening, cartilage snapping, bone grinding, wet tissue tearing. What emerged from beneath the mask was not human. Its eyes burned with inhuman malice, its mouth twisted in a predatory grin. This thing had been wearing Mickey's skin like a trophy. The truth hit Brandon and Rachel like a physical blow. Evil hadn't died with SpongeBob. It had just taken on a new face.
God, you're sick.
Brandon spat, fury and terror mixing in his voice. The butcher just smiled, a slow, deliberate grin that dripped with satisfaction. He grabbed a canister of gasoline, splashing it over the cages and the desperate children inside. With a flourish, he struck a match. Flames erupted instantly, devouring everything in their path. The children's screams filled the chamber, echoing off the stone walls, building into a crescendo of agony that would haunt Brandon and Rachel for the rest of their lives. Through the smoke and chaos, the headless Mickey pulled out a strange device, a bomb, with a blinking red timer counting down the seconds. Panic surged through Brandon. He grabbed Rachel, who was frozen with terror, and hoisted her over his shoulder. Adrenaline fueled his escape as he sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors, flames licking at their heels. They burst into the daylight just as the bomb detonated, through the park with apocalyptic force. The ground shook. Buildings collapsed. The joyful sounds of Disney World were replaced by an endless, roaring silence. When the smoke cleared, Brandon and Rachel stood alone amidst the ruins, a wasteland where magic had turned to ash. Millions gone in an instant. The world as they knew it had ended, and somehow, they were the only survivors. This wasn't a haunted game, or a twisted cartoon. This was something far worse, evil in its purest, most relentless form, clawing its way into reality. As Brandon looked at the devastation, he realized the truth. Their fight wasn't over. The nightmares weren't finished with them yet. Somewhere out there, an even greater darkness was waiting, ready to test their limits and threaten everything they had left. And this time, there would be no escape. Their deadliest adventure was only beginning.